Hi, everyone, and welcome on the podcast Stories from War. My guest today is the infamous Operator Starsky. So, hello, Starsky, how are you? And as everyone is asking, how is Fudge doing?
Hi, everybody. I'm fine. Thank you so much. Fudge is doing fantastic. Just returned home from, we've been walking out. He's overly excited because it's winter and he likes snow and he likes eating and chewing snow and things like that. All the things that make dogs happy. So he's fine. As for me, nobody cares.
We care, Starsky, we care. So I would like to start actually by not asking you a question, but I have to personally thank you. And I'm sure a lot of people will join me in this thank you, because a lot of us have been following you from early on in the war. And when the war broke, well, I was living in Indonesia with my family and watching all this news in horror. And of course, all the media were super dramatic, and it was dramatic, but you know how the media tend to emphasize the horror of things. And it was really overwhelming. And suddenly my husband told me, hey, look, you're going to like this guy. He's really funny. I started watching your video and it was like a bubble of oxygen, because even if you were, like with your rifle and fighting, you were so calm and funny in your videos. So thank you for that, Starsky.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
So, Starsky, you are a press officer. You're based in Hostomel. And could you give a little bit of an explanation of what is your duty?
As a press officer, my duty is to cooperate with media, with press. My duty is to monitor a lot of information, including Russian media, Russian channels, and that's why I get emotional at times. Sometimes I just need 2 hours to cry in the back of my car because it's a torture. And what I also do as a press officer is basically I'm responsible for our informational strategy, for directed at our target audience, which is Ukrainian public. Before creating a channel in English, I had a big YouTube channel in Ukrainian and different social media dedicated to our soldiers, to the soldiers of my brigade.
Okay.
So that's basically my duty. My current blog is not sponsored by Ukrainian state at all, unfortunately. That's I would say, one of my personal missions is to deliver information from Ukraine to the international society, because I feel responsible for that, and I feel grateful for all the support that international community delivers to Ukraine, to my people.
Okay. So all your videos are basically a personal initiative of yours, right?
Yes. I have, even in this regard, though, I have complete support of my command, because they know I'm a press officer. I do my thing. Okay. It is their position. But in general, it's just my private blog where I can talk like a private person, partially private person, partially official person. That's why YouTube blogs always give, this kind of advantage.
Okay. And how do you stay mentally healthy when you actually have to watch all these Russian propaganda videos? I've tried to do a little bit, and I have to stop after, I think maximum is like 20 minutes, because it's so horrible to watch. What they are saying, the aggression, the aggressivity, the hate. I mean, it's really like watching some Nazi stuff from World War II. And it's hard to believe that this is still happening. So how do you stay healthy mentally?
I usually promise myself some good food after that as a reward. Sometimes it's sometimes McDonald's. We reopened a McDonald's in Bucha, actually, and sometimes it's something like sushi. Actually, it's not a funny part, though. In Ukraine, we have like this tradition of like mourning our dead comrades and our friends who died. Usually, we gather in big group. I think like everywhere else in the world, right? And have something together. And for me, it's like sushi. When my Serhiy Kishkin, he was from my platoon. When he was killed in Rubizhne, I just went to a sushi place. I ordered myself a sushi, and I had more mourning there. I was mourning my friend. So that's what keeps me psychologically healthy. Not 100% because I think we will all be a bit cuckoo in the end after this, but you have to promise yourself some small rewards, or otherwise you will go completely insane.
Is your sense of humor in your shorts and video helping to kind of get this crazy stuff out? Because you're actually making fun of, like Russian reaction, but you're just portraying the truth, the real reaction of Russian. So it's really funny for us, but it's actually the truth. So does it help at least to get rid of, I don't know, some, negative emotion that you could have?
I think it's a perfect protective mechanism everybody has, and especially Ukrainians, I think, because it's our national stuff, okay, having fun even at hardest time.
Okay, thanks. So I would like to move on to talking a little bit about your background. So where are you from? Where did you grow up? How was your family? How it was to grow up in Ukraine, and can you explain for us Westerners who might have a different type of childhood?
It was so cool. It was so cool because, even though Ukraine was kind of poor country, but it was really cool because we always had a lot of friends. We always had fun. We always had somewhere to go, together. And my memories about Ukraine prior to the big war, even though there was already war since 2014, prior to the full-scale Russian invasion, it was like this. Whenever we had free time, we would go downtown, see places, see people. There would always be some kind of festival or, just artists on the streets like everywhere else, And we would just spend time together with my friends, together with my family. Sometimes we would go fishing. I suck at fishing personally. I caught 0 fish in 1 year of fishing, but I still love the process. That was my life. I was growing up in Kiev mostly.
Okay.
As a military brat, again, it's very hard to answer directly where I come from because I come from all around Ukraine. My father and our family, we were traveling a lot, and in the end, when Soviet Union collapsed, we moved to Kiev, and my father started working in the Ministry of Defense. He was a communications person in the Ministry of Defense.
There you go.
Yeah.
Are you following his footsteps?
I think it's my doom. Okay. I was going to school in Kiev. I finished school here, and then I went to the Ukrainian National University of Culture and Arts.
Oh my God, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Not at all military.
Yeah, exactly. And I studied public relations.
Okay.
And when I graduated, I found a job in different international organizations. I worked for the projects of the United States Agency for International Development. I worked for the World Bank Group for a while. Different international organizations plus strategic communication agencies, television, and things like that.
So communication was always a big part of your work.
Yeah, it was. Of course, I always dreamt of having a farm, but
okay.
Yeah, but the only animal I have is my dog. Actually, he doesn't give any milk or cheese or eggs.
Fudge.
Yeah,
useless fudge.
Yeah, he gives plenty of fur that I have to pick up after him, And when I think it was like in 2010, probably, I started my metal band. We were playing in Kiev sometimes, and of course we thought that it was the coolest band in the world, which eventually disintegrated.
Oh no.
Painfully, yeah.
Did you expect to have like international tours and to actually do that professionally, or it was just a hobby?
When you have a band, like it's by default, it must be internationally successful, and you have to have all the glory in the world and things like that. Yeah, of course, like we had a couple of concert.
Mhm.
And then it disintegrated because generally musicians are bastards. I'm telling as one of them, especially guitarists. So
That you are.
yeah, to some extent, and that's why we had a bunch of quarrels and we disintegrated. Yeah, so that was my life basically, and like there were different parts of my life. I was married, and I luckily divorced last year. It was fun. I don't think that, living in Ukraine can be considered as like dangerous or horrible. I would say that we were very much like Czech Republic or Poland or any of those countries, with the only reason of some corrupted pro-Russian governments, that caused our people to be, I think, like not like poor, because people in Ukraine had more or less normal salaries. Ukraine was always very, very cheap in terms of prices. So people from the West arriving to Ukraine could spend their money and have like very good quality of life, let's say. And it still is. You can have a very nice dinner in a restaurant for $10. Ukrainian cuisine is probably one of the richest in the world. Everybody can confirm that, because our meals, our food, it can make you full instantly, and it's very, very tasty.
Okay.
Everybody can confirm that. Yeah. Plus, I know place.
Yeah, you know place. And actually, I discovered a lot of cuisine and food stuff through Johnny video, because he's always taking his camera whenever he goes to the restaurant. So thank you, Johnny, for making us a tour of all the Kyiv restaurants.
Yeah, that's the reason why I enjoy meeting Johnny, because every time we meet, we go somewhere, like have sushi or those Chinese pelmeni and things like that.
Okay, so Johnny, nothing to do with you. It's actually just because it's nice food.
It's because it's natural for people, we gather together, and then we have something together, and I think it has its roots back, in times of cave people. That's what we did for forever. That food was always making us like feel like family, I would say.
Yeah, sharing a meal. Yeah. And looking back in your childhood with your eyes of today as an adult, do you see that there was Russian propaganda going on? And if yes, how it affected you?
Let's say Russian propaganda back then mainly consisted of their cultural expansion, because it was kind of tough to find a Ukrainian magazine, let's say, on the shelves. It was hard to find a Ukrainian movie, not because we didn't have Ukrainian magazines or movies, but because pro-Russian government had its influence big time. And in Ukraine, in order to have a business, you had to have connections, because you know how corruption works, and you had to have good connections with people who supported pro-Russian movements in Ukraine. That's why most of our businesses in the media, like music channels, like some of the news agencies, magazines, newspaper, movies, they were in Russian, because people who produced or supervised all this, they thought that it brings more cash, Okay. In 2015, 1 year after beginning of the war, after annexation of Crimea and Donbass, we started having this boom in Ukrainian culture. Instantly, Ukrainian people learned that it's always more fun to listen to your own, to something your own, And we had this boom in terms of Ukrainian artists and music and movies and everything. And it took very, very short period of time for people to completely forget about this expansionist Russian culture. Plus, at that time, Russian culture became like pumped up with their propaganda, basically. They produced a lot of, a lot of crazy books, like sci-fi, about Russian time travelers who travel back in time and kill Hitler and things like that. And it's not as fun as Inglourious Basterds, believe me. Those are amazing. Those have some kind of culture in them, at least. I cannot say that by 2013 we would have some kind of big Russian propaganda in Ukraine, like politically, okay? Culturally, yes, we had some influences, considering the fact that our dictator Yanukovych that fled to Russia due to the Revolution of Dignity, he was basically a Russian puppet, and he was also like a mafioso. At the same time, we didn't have like propaganda here, because he controlled everything. Basically, he did everything Putin asked him to do. After that, after the revolution and the beginning of the revolution in Ukraine, it was like the beginning when the hell got loose, when Russian media would start having like all those crazy interviews or broadcasts from Maidan, and they started saying some incredible BS, like Nazi everywhere. Ukraine turned Nazi instantly, like, in one day. Yesterday we were friends and Russians were our brothers. Today we turned Nazi instantly. The only thing, why Russian explanation why Ukrainians were Nazi was because Ukrainians didn't like Russian.
Yeah.
Because, whenever Russian trolls accuse Ukrainians of being Nazi, I ask just one question. And when they give, for example, this Azov regiment, I always ask them how many Jewish, Muslim, Black people, Asian people were hurt by Azov regiment in Ukraine between 2014 and 2021. And the answer is pretty much zero. In Russian propaganda, they say that everyone who is against Russian politics of terror are Nazis. And they have this thing. Currently, they're trying to retaliate on the West for everything that happened in the World War II. So basically, what they say in their media is that they want to finish Ukraine, and then they want to finish all the Western countries that they failed to finish back in the World War II because they were Nazi as well. And they're calling Nazi their yesterday's allies from France, Great Britain, the US, etc., etc.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy, but it's just a technique, like point the finger at someone and make it a villain and say all the nonsense about it. What I find incredible, and I'm looking at it with my Western culture and Western view, of course, so I am biased, but is how can people believe it? Like when we were studying World War II at school, you're like, how could the people believe that? And then there we go. We are today, 2023. This is happening. And it's been happening for 1 year now. So it feels like the most incredible, stupid stories, the best it is. Like all the nonsense about, even stuff like the birds or the genetically modified whatever. What the heck is going on with that? How can you believe that? I mean, at some point, it feels like, no, like this could never happen. And the more you think it could never happen, the more they come with another, like even more stupider story. You know what I mean? It's just, wow. Okay, that's very scary.
Sometimes I think that they just copy-paste Goebbels, completely. On the other hand, I think mostly this propaganda is aimed at people who were not supposed to teach, lessons in school, because it works on them very well. It works on people who support like flat earth and things like that. It works on superstitious people a lot. Actually, Russian media are full of those shows dedicated to like aliens and prophets of the past and like psychics and things like that, which basically explains why they are so convinced that they have this magic connection with cosmos, with nature, everything that makes them chosen nation, and they have like the most true church, Orthodox Church, and things like that, all those foundations of the Russian world. They have something like 8 or 9 of those, like creeds of the Russian world. And the reason, again, why it works in Russia is because it was specifically designed to work this way. They have this very much developed field of mythological design, and they use it everywhere. Like not only in their media, but also in their music videos, in their movies, of course. So they have a lot of those. What people should understand is that we shouldn't underestimate Russian propaganda, because it was created and developed by Russians centuries ago. And it was polished perfectly in the times of the Bolshevik Revolution. Those Russian revolutionaries, they were so effective, so Stalin had to eventually eliminate them because they could be dangerous for the existence of the Soviet Union. His best friend Trotsky ran to the South America, I believe, because he was afraid he would be, eliminated, even though he was one of the first people, one of the first guy. And currently they spend enormous money and enormous resources on those channels and YouTubers and yada yada. It's something that we don't have on the West. It's something that like we're not accustomed to see such things. We don't even believe that they can exist, but they can, because in 2017 or 2018, I think it was in 2018, according to the information by the Ukrainian Security and Defense Council, Russia spent on the external propaganda around $4 billion.
Okay.
And we're talking about channels like Russia Today, bloggers like Patrick Lancaster and Graham Phillips, and all kinds of agencies and all kinds of opinion makers. So generally this number could be even bigger, but Russia can have it because, even despite their citizens have very, very low quality of life, but at the same point, Russian elites have this pipe sticking out the ground, and they can drain quite a few, tons of oil and sell it and invest this into propaganda. That's why when people say that, everybody does that, like everybody produces propaganda, especially Evil West and Ukraine. No, we don't, because first of all, we don't have such enormous amount of money. We don't have an oil pipe. It's not hidden anywhere in the bushes, unfortunately. And of course, like in the civilized world, we have public relations. That's the only legitimate kind of industry to deliver information to people, in my opinion. So that's the reason.
Yeah, I guess what they mean, because of course everyone is going to be biased, but everyone is. I'm biased because I grew up in France, so I will have a very Western view over, like everything. So I guess in that sense, we are all a product of some sort of propaganda, but I guess the Russian propaganda is very different in the sense that there is a clear goal to completely zombify people and feed them a narrative that they're going to believe. Like that's a core belief, like a religion. And there is a lot of money, as you were saying, spent to that. So I think this is where there is a huge difference with in the Western world, where, of course, there will be some sort of influence, if you want, from the media. But it's not in a very common goal of making people stupid and believe one narrative.
The reason why Russia needs a lot of stupid people is to basically throw them into a meat grinder of a war. That's the only reason. And that's the only successful, to some extent, strategy Russia always uses to reach its goals on the front line, is to bury the enemy positions under the pile of their own bodies. Everything has a reason. And the reason why they need this propaganda is because they already calculated, their goals of invading other countries, invading countries of the West, and yada yada. They dream of reuniting the USSR, which means returning those territories of the Baltic countries, of Ukraine, Poland, of course, some republics of the Asia, and Georgia, and things like that. That's why we are talking about the evil empire that always wanted to expand and capture other territories. If you look at Russia, you can ask yourself a question: how come Russia is the biggest country in the world? Was it because all its regions like voluntarily joined Russia because they were admired by balalaikas and vodka? No. They were conquered.
Of course not. Yeah.
Always. And that's the reason why they need propaganda. They need to justify their actions or their future actions in the eyes of their internal audience. And they want to justify their actions in the eyes of their target audience on the West. Unfortunately, there are such people who, they have this false, let's say, impression that, Russia is the most democratic country in the world. Yeah. Of course, there are people who literally say, of course, what Russia did is very, very bad. They invaded Ukraine and killed plenty of people. Of course, it's bad. Yeah, everybody knows that Russians are bad. But Ukrainians, but Ukrainians, they had a coup. They are so bad. They are poor and evil and Nazi, of course. If those people were to say exactly that, only standing in the middle of the Red Square, they would be arrested and spend 10 years in prison only for saying the first part of this sentence: Russia is bad and they killed a lot of civilians. Only for saying that, they would be already arrested there. So there's, in my opinion, there's a very simple way to actually wake up those people, to make them wake up, all those supporters of the Russian terrorism and people who support Russia on the West. They gotta visit freaking Voronezh or Khabarovsk and try to speak their language on the streets a bit, and it will change a lot.
Okay, so going back to your story, we left when you were playing music with your band, and you were absolutely not in the military. So how come you ended up joining the military?
It wasn't really much like that, because I was growing up, on the military bases, where we had like our apartments or place to live with my family. So I knew this military culture from inside very much. And actually, sometimes I had this idea of joining a military, but the fact is, prior to 2014, our army was pretty much ruined. And it's because of our friendship with Russians. Before 2008, we had mutual military exercise with Russians, and according to our doctrine, your country and other Western countries were potential enemies of Ukraine. You see, because we were part of this alliance, security alliance of the Eastern countries, headed by Russia, of course. And I'm so glad we quit that freaking crap, because it was shameful.
I suppose you felt it a lot through your father story, because he was in the military. So did he feel that a lot, and how did he navigate? Because if you're in the military back in those days, I presume you also have to follow the Eastern Bloc and the Eastern philosophy, and how come he was not affected by it and kind of saying, no, that's great, we should be Russians,
because he already became a military as a Soviet officer. Back in those days, he participated in operations near at the Chernobyl station when it exploded, and militaries were sent there to clean up everything. Also, some number of different operations performed by the Soviet troops in different countries. But he was Ukrainian, as majority of Ukrainians serving in the Soviet army. And when this all this inhumane, unholy unity collapsed. We were very, very much happy. But again, when he served in his in the Ministry of Defense, and he was sent to international missions abroad, because as soon as Ukraine became independent, it started participating in the peacekeeping missions of the United Nations.
Okay.
As soon as 1992. There was already a war in the former Yugoslavia, and my father was sent there. He spent, I think, 2 deployments in the former Yugoslavia, making documentaries about Ukrainian soldiers. Of course, it was obvious that we should cut all of our ties with the past, with Russians. All those things they say about brother nations and yada yada. It's a BS. We gotta run away as soon as we can. And of course, what I see in Ukrainian army men who had opportunity to meet, to talk, to communicate with their colleagues from other armies, they change. That's what we should do. We should see how other people live, what they have in mind, what they talk about. We should learn from them because it changes a lot. And Ukrainian soldiers start smiling more often, being less grumpy and things like that. So after those deployments in the former Yugoslavia, my father went to the UK, where he studied, and he communicated with his colleagues a lot in London. And when he returned, he told me a lot of things about how the West basically lives, how people there live. It was amazing. I'm very glad that Ukrainians, even though a lot of our population, let's say, they were poor and they had to travel abroad, other countries to earn money and send back home and things like that. We have huge diaspora of Ukrainians in countries like Italy, Portugal, Spain, France, of course. But I'm very glad that they had this opportunity to see that culture and bring some of those values back to Ukraine, because eventually it changed a lot in people's minds. And, our society was changing very fast, I would say. And even in the army, despite the top managers, right, the pro-Russian government, despite it was pro-Russian, but our majority of our officers, they were clear-minded, they were conscious.
Okay.
Yeah, we all understood that we have to have membership in NATO eventually, because this is the only thing that can give us some kind of protection. Of course, the problem was the Budapest Memorandum, because by giving out 1,700 nuclear warheads, Ukraine was persuaded that it will have security guaranteed. And one of those countries was Russia, of course, one of those countries that guaranteed this security to Ukraine. So we had this false confidence,
Yeah, a sense of security that is not really there.
Yeah. But we were talking about joining NATO for years. We had multiple TV programs and things like that, showing how it all works, what's the difference between old post-Soviet armies and modern West armies and things like that. And it always amazed. But the main reason why I joined was basically because my country was in danger in 2014. I participated in the Revolution of Dignity as one of the activists. I received a bunch of traumas there. But when the war started, I was receiving my treatment in Poland.
Okay, because you were hurt during this revolution.
During the protests, yeah. Okay. Not like something big. I received a rubber bullet to my knee and some minor traumas during street fights with pro-Russian supporters. And in August, there was this operation in Ukraine where Ukrainian army was surrounded by Russian troops, and it was negotiated and decided that Russians would make this green corridor for Ukrainian troops and let them go. And basically Putin promised that, but of course we know that you don't trust Russians, and it was in Ilovaisk, and it became known as a Green Corridor of Death, because as soon as Ukrainian army started moving out through this corridor, they were shot at. A lot of people died there. But the thing is, there was my friend among them. Unfortunately, he's not with us today, but he was there. He was captured as a prisoner, and I was in Poland. When I learned about it, I decided that I should do anything it takes to return to Ukraine and help fight and eventually liberate my friend. So end of 2014, I returned to Ukraine, and I joined the voluntary battalion of police special forces called Kiev 1. And next year already we had we had 3 deployments. 2 of them were in Donbass. In the sector B, it was Marinka, Krasnohorivka, Kurakhove, Verkhnyotoretsk, those areas.
Yeah, this one.
So that was the reason why I decided to become a military. And like, I was a police officer, but again, in 2015, I learned about this crazy selection program to a new brigade that was being formed in the National Guard of Ukraine. And we were told that this brigade was created involving modern standards, involving standards of NATO countries. And we were like, oh my God, we gotta try. So out of 50 participants, I was among 10 people who passed this selection program. Yeah, it was kind of tough.
A little bit like the SEAL training, stuff like that. I mean, we always know the SEAL training and Hell Week and stuff like that. So it was a version of that in Ukraine, or?
Yeah, it was hell multiplied by 10, actually. But you see what I'm talking about, because when you look at Ukrainian militaries, we all know that those guys are tough. So I passed this selection program, and I became a soldier, a private, right? I was a machine gunner, then I was a rifleman, then I was offered a position of an NCO in my platoon. I passed the school for sergeant.
Sorry, NCO, non-commissioned officer, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I passed the school for Ukrainian sergeants. I returned as a sergeant for my platoon. And then we had our first deployment in Stanitsa Luhanska, and then there were 2 more deployments in the Svetlodarsk Bulge. It's where we were shot at for the first time and shelled and things like that. So it was kind of fun.
Yeah, it's really funny because you're saying it with a smile.
It's because, even comparing to that time, what we see today is a completely different war. We had everything from tanks to artillery shellings, including heavy artillery like 152 millimeter howitzers shooting at us, but nothing like cruise missiles, nothing like aviation involved with those bombs, because actually cruise missiles and aviation is the most destructive force invented by people. So we had nothing like that. And for 8 years, this war existed basically, like somewhere there, like on the east, on the TV. And Ukrainian society was pretty much isolated from that. Sometimes we Ukrainian militaries, we would feel a bit upset because of that, because people didn't understand, like, what are we doing, things like that. But at the same time, we were happy, because if people don't feel like being at war, it means that we do our job well. That's why we were happy, even though we were like underestimated by our society. I remember before this war started, and we already saw it coming, the big invasion. Russians already had their military training in Belarus, etc. And when I saw it coming, I decided to create a bunch of episodes dedicated to Ukrainian civilians. Generally, what to do in case of big, like, full-scale war, what to do in case of artillery shelling, what happens when the war starts in your city that becomes a frontline city, what to do if you found like explosives or improvised explosive devices or landmines or whatever. And then I decided to create a bunch of other episodes dedicated to Ukrainian territorial defense, because already men started joining territorial defense. And again, like just basics. Like you cannot teach people on YouTube, you know, how to fight, but at least you can share some experience with them. The reaction was hilarious, because people watching those videos, they were like, why are you trying to scale the heck out of us?
Okay.
Like there will be no invasion. We like, what are you trying to do? Escalate situation?
Okay.
Are you trying to scare us? Like, why are you doing this? I was confident that, you know, let them talk. I don't care. And yeah, of course, there were, like, you know, a lot of advices for people, like what to do in case of bombing, specifically what you gotta have in your emergency backpack.
Yeah.
Things like that. And that was one thing that you know, made me actually worried, because like some people didn't care about. Now I think every Ukrainian family has like a emergency backpack. But you know, at least I tried to do something back then, like months before this invasion.
And it's really interesting, because you're the first person to tell me that you felt something was coming. So I've spoken with a lot of people through these interviews, but also outside. And I always ask, did you feel that something was up, you know, like before the full-scale invasion? So Crimea, kind of, it happened, and there was not really a lot of reaction after that. But no one told me we saw that coming. No one. You're the first one. So can you elaborate a little bit? How come you felt something was coming? And was it because you had access to some information because you were part of the military?
Yeah, absolutely. Two reasons, and they are very, very simple. First of all, the day you see 150,000 Russian soldiers hanging out across the border.
Hello.
Yeah. It's a
what are you guys doing here?
Just smoking, you know. When you see them, it's a good sign that there's a good reason for them being there, you know.
Yeah.
And we didn't see any other reason than invading Ukraine. They had that first military exercise around 1 year prior to the invasion. I think it was in 2020, something like that.
Okay.
And they were already training to invade Ukraine. My friend Bogdan, the one who was captured at the Chernobyl power plant, he told me that those Spetsnaz people who captured Chernobyl power plant, they talk. And actually, Bogdan has this like gift of, you know, talking to people. He can get into your head very, very easy. And those Spetsnaz guys, those Russians, told him that they were training to capture Chernobyl power plant at exactly similar power plant located in Russia 1.5 years ago. So they already had that training. And yeah, one of the things was that, like, you know, 150,000 people across the border are very hard not to see. Another reason was, and I talked about it, their, again, the communication, the information that was coming from Russia, because when they had those exercises, their main rhetorics was that we will kill everybody. Like, we don't care. We will invade. We will kill, dominate, and things like that. West will be ours, you know. Then 2 months before the invasion, like in December 2021, they completely changed their rhetorics, and they start saying, no, we're not gonna attack.
Okay.
We are peaceful nation.
Yeah, that's a red flag.
Yeah, we are peaceful nation. Don't escalate. You are escalating. Those soldiers are absolutely peaceful people. And that was the moment when I realized that I gotta prepare my weapons and my backpack and everything. Because when they start saying that, you gotta consider something absolutely different. So that's the answer. I saw, you know, this shift in their rhetoric, their communication, and that's when I realized that the war is inevitable. I didn't know the date, of course, But I knew that it will happen 100%.
Did you remember where you were and what were your first thoughts when the moment the war started?
Yeah, sure. It was night between February 23rd and 24th. I was basically sleeping at home, and I went to sleep already knowing that tomorrow we will wake up in a different world. So I prepared my bag. A lot of my guys from my brigade, they say the same. Like those who follow the news, they already knew that there will be something in the morning. And I was already prepared. I had my things in place and things like that. I woke up to the sounds of explosions when Russians hit multiple cities and Kyiv as well with their cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. And that's when I knew that I gotta get to my job real fast. Already when I was enrolled, I received a call from my job, and they were saying that we have an alarm and we gotta gather at the base. And on my way there, I received a call from my friends who said that we were hit by a cruise missile. And my biggest, let's say, the only thing that was making me sad that moment was that I had to say goodbye to my dog for a while. I brought him to my ex, like for a month. He lived at my ex's, and maybe more actually. And I arrived to my base and I saw that huge hole in the ground. You see, because it was a high precision Russian missile, it didn't hit anything. So it only hit like a huge piece of green land, basically.
Yeah, okay.
And then in just a couple hours after my arrival, the air raid on Hostomel started, and we had to fight. Again, it's my biggest regret of all that we don't have much video from that. And I was a press officer, you know. I'm the guy with the camera who should run around like crazy and recording everybody like shooting or getting heroically wounded or like dying or whatever. I gotta make videos and pictures of that. No, because everybody were busy. And I'm talking about guys like financial officers, staff officers. Everybody were shooting, you know.
Yeah.
So we had to defend our base. We had to defend the airport. Unfortunately, we ran out of ammo. We ran out of anti-air missiles. We only had like 6, something like that. Yeah, but there were the number of helicopters was a bit bigger, something like 100. So we had to move out, and actually, like, we did everything in accordance to the mission of our brigade, because my brigade is called Rapid Response Brigade, and what we have to do is we have to withstand the first strike and wait until heavy cavalry arrives, which is basically mechanized units of the armed forces of Ukraine, which basically happened. 72nd Brigade arrived, and then our paratroopers arrived, and yada yada. But one of the coolest decisions that was made that day by our commander, actually 2 decisions, because first one was to move out to save people, because we, like, of course we could use our bayonets and gloriously charge people like
you just need horses and that's it. You have the big Napoleon picture.
Yeah, Napoleon style, 100%. But I think Fuch would appreciate me not being a hero of Ukraine, but being a living person, you know, because somebody has to feed him and clean him. So he ordered our troops to move out, and another crucial decision he made was to damage the runway of the airport using our howitzers. We had 2 howitzers there. Luckily, even I didn't know about it, of course. And we damaged the runway, and then 72nd Brigade helped us with their howitzers and their multiple rocket launch systems. And then eventually, in the end of the day, the Ukrainian Air Force arrived, our Su-24 bombers, and they hit that runway as well. So it
Okay.
was being destroyed during the whole day. So Russians were not able to land in Hostomel and deploy their brigade and yada yada. So it was like one of the most crucial decisions that were made that day. And then we got evacuated to Kiev, where we took control over some fortress, let's call it this way. And then we were protecting strategic objects in Kiev, and we were also participating in the combat in the area of Irpin and Bucha and Moshchun, those areas, and basically the battle for Hostomel. The first losses began. First people that I knew became dead. They died. Eventually, Russians were in this. They got into this operative encirclement in that huge area north of Kiev, and they risked of losing like tens of thousands of people. So they had to run away very, very fast, leaving us a lot of things, leaving us hundreds of boxes of ammunition for tanks, shells and things like that. And then I returned back to my base, back to my office that was turned into a Russian toilet.
Yeah, I remember you even did a video about that.
What I forgot to record was, they wrote a lot of things on the wall specifically for me. We returned to my base. I returned Fuch back to his father, which is me, and that's the end of the story.
Okay, and after that, so you're still based in the same location, and now how has your work evolved?
Didn't change much. Still doing communication strategy for my brigade. Still doing the same basically. Currently, my second press officer Max, he is attached to our battalion tactical group, and he operates in the Donbass. Because we're military, we do what we're told to do, right? So he's there. I'm here. Maybe eventually we will switch. Maybe not. We will see.
Would you like that?
Not
you
like
just do. Yeah, it's not a question. Maybe.
Yeah, it's not a question.
Okay.
There is one thing. I'm one of the best shooters in my brigade. Like, I'm not glorifying myself. It's a fact. I shot a drone myself back in 2017.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a Ukrainian drone, unfortunately. But
so you're a very good shooter. You might not be the best person to identify which drone belongs to who.
I didn't give it permission to fly, first of all, and it wasn't waving a blue yellow flag and screaming Slava Ukraine. That's why, it was instantly identified as Russian.
That is 100% the drone's fault, not yours, Starsky.
Absolutely. So I'm a good shooter, and basically, I would love to go, definitely. My commander told me that because I'm a part of the head, like HQ, I gotta stay there. Like, we all should do our job. Of course, it would bring me a lot of content for my YouTube channel and yada yada, but that's not the point. That's not the mission of my blog. My mission is to deliver information where I am, and if I'm there, I will deliver information from there. If Belarus attacks Ukraine from the north, then of course I will have a lot of new content for my blog, because as a reserve, we will fight Belarusians or Russians attacking through Belarus. So we will see. We gotta wait, I think, until the end of the February to be able to say more detail.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is, do you have any sort of guilt attached to the fact that you're stationed, like where you're at the moment, and you have some of your colleagues and friends that might be on the front line? Because it's hard for us to understand. I mean, I'm not in the military, I'm not a soldier, I'm not fighting for my country. And do you have this kind of internal struggle of, like you being here and seeing your friends over there?
Yes and no, because I'm on the front line since the end of 2014.
Yeah.
And I had numerous deployments there
Yes.
before people even thought that there's a war. So I don't have that guilt, and in the army I learned not to think much about myself,
Okay.
not to pity myself. It's not what we do. A lot of people stationed somewhere in the rear, they were texting me and saying, man, I feel guilty because my guys are there. And what I do, I just sit in the office in the headquarters, and I give them salary, and I used to say, like, dude, what you do is important. Shouldn't feel guilty because they receive salary, their family receives salaries because of what you do. That is important. In the army, everybody has his or her own place, and we do what we should do wherever we are. So basically, when I'm asked the same, like, I'm in his situation right now, I do what I should do wherever I am. And in Hostomel, again, I was part of the headquarters, not the biggest combat press officer in the world, but still we had that combat, and everybody was involved, again, including financial officers, including our conscripts that again are not being sent to the front lines because of our legislation. We don't do that. So it all depends. I cannot predict the future, but do I like the process of fighting orcs? Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Do you know how the name orc started? Do you know when and how it started appearing in the narrative of this war, the orc?
There are three versions. First version is when they die, they turn greenish, like orcs. They look literally like them. Second version is Warhammer, and we're talking about Fields of Body, which reflects Russian tactics very, very much. And another thing was, I remember that we were calling them orcs back in 2015 because they were behaving like orcs. They were pooping everywhere. They were like writing different messages for people on the walls and things like that. We found a lot of drug users, like orcs who had like syringes,
Yeah, okay.
And that's why it was very obvious that we are not fighting an intelligent army with some, good, noble ideas, nothing like that. We're fighting a bunch of thugs, basically orcs, because that's the way they do things. That's that's who they are.
Okay, thanks for that. So let's talk maybe a little bit of some future and some good thoughts. So first, how are you going to celebrate when Ukraine wins?
I'm going to drink for 3 days and then I'm going to have a vacation in order to visit every country where I have friends, which is a lot of countries, and drink there. And drink there with people. So that's why I have to prepare my liver for this, because it will be a very, very hard task, as we know. And I don't drink at all, so it will be twice as hard. But I promise.
Okay, sounds like a lot of headaches.
Yeah, and things I don't remember, which probably good.
You will forget all your trip around the world because you will be drinking.
Yeah, it's like I will just sit down in the bus and I will wake up back home. It will be great.
Okay. And so once Ukraine wins, do you have any idea what are you going to do? Where will you go? And what are your plans for after the war? Do you have any?
Maybe I will dedicate some of my time to producing more songs, because people were asking about it. I would say metal is not the most popular genre out there, but I love it personally, and a lot of people love it. And
I love it too. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Well, when I was younger, I guess now I'm listening to metal songs when I'm running and it's getting hard. It always gives you a lot of power, so it's good.
Yeah. You gotta check out All Faces Down. They have this album that is called a fine song called Moment, for example. that's the album. You gotta buy all the album. They are great for running. Like I work out every time to those songs.
Okay,
And
noted.
yeah,
Thanks for that.
and probably I will try to do something useful for people. I don't know exactly what it's gonna be, but I cannot predict future, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll see. Thank you so much for your time. And do you have a last word you want to say to the listener?
As always, I would like to say big thank you on behalf of my people. Thank you for being friendly and supportive, and thank you for supporting Ukraine, because this is the right thing to do. Thank you so much.